So we're going to continue with our ongoing series on learning how to be the light, what it means, and how that works for us as we walk through our daily lives. Always remember your memory verse. Carry it with you. So we're going to talk one more time about conflict, and then we're moving on. Okay, next week we've got to talk about other things. But there were two parts of this we didn't get to. So we didn't get to teens and we didn't get to tweens. And so if you're not familiar with Ray Fuller speak, a tween is anyone in their 20s. So you're really not an adult until you're 33. That goes for you and hobbits. So everyone has been a teen at some point, right? Okay. You either are one, you've been one, or you have one. So that should be pretty familiar. You get it? So that's not really a knock on teens. There's a miscommunication in there. You got to know your audience. You've got to tailor your comment to the person it's intended for. And in this case, they didn't. They asked them as a general question, inside or outside, under the assumption that the young person would know they meant inside, outside their ear, when they rarely, if ever, or have ever thought about the inside and the outside of their ear. But what do they think about often? Going outside and being forced to come inside. And so they used their experience against your statement, and everyone got confused. So when it comes to conflicts with teens, the first question I think you always want to ask yourself is, are we talking about the right thing, or have I said it the right way? Or are we both talking about the same thing? It might resolve some problems. And remember this is the hard part. Have you ever had someone when you were a teen, one of your elders or somebody just tell you, look, I love you, but you got to go. We're done with this conversation. It is over. I can't finish it with you here now and have both of us live. We used to talk like that to each other. How about that? These are for discussion. Not a lot of verses today, because we've had several in the previous 2 weeks and a few here this morning, but this is for discussion. Right. Right, the advise and assist role. You're familiar with that terminology. It's the advise and assist role. I'll point out a mistake, but you're free to make it, provided it's not catastrophic. Watch out for potholes while you're driving. Oh, okay, I guess not. So just understand this. I think this is a lot of what is underlying all of the discussions or conflicts that we have with teens as we go through our lives, is that they think they're somewhere you don't. They think they're much further along on the evolutionary chain than you can believe. And they want that freedom and responsibility. And everything in their life is telling them that they're ready for it, right? That's what school does. You're a teenager, you're ready. Get out there, get a job, go to work, be. And they come home and you're like, dude, bedtime, homework, you got to participate in the family rituals, and you're still treating them like a child. Is that fair for our resident teenagers? I'm putting you on the spot. No, you say no. You live your life. You are your own man. Say it. So we'll talk about that when we get to tweens. He's not wrong. You're 40. You're not an adult. Sell the house and move. Don't give them the new address. Because you wouldn't leave? Tell me this is a confession. Come on. No. Yeah. It happens if we're not careful. Sometimes it happens even if we are. How about that? The 3 most uttered words by any teen? Huh? That's right. So we're going to get to the answer here. But normally this comes as a wail, right? It's not fair. And what's the response? Hold on. Life's not fair.
That's the same thing. The worst part with me, though, is my parents always said it to me, and now I'm catching myself saying it. So that's the bad.
Because it's true. It's true across generations. Do you had? Oh, I thought your hand shot up. Wow, a weather joke. Way to go, Dad. Well played.
I just used to tell my kids, you have the misfortune of being a Peterson.
Right? So if you didn't hear that, Fred said that he would tell his children that they have the misfortune of being a Peterson. Nice. That's very adult. My answer was pack a bag. I think they want you. But even amongst you're right. That probably is the most used reason is why they're comparing what they perceive to be a benefit that someone else is getting that they're not. For my kids, it was about the different ways I treated each of them. Fair doesn't mean that everyone gets the same thing all the time. That's not fair.
My daughters had the misfortune or opportunity, you can look at it either way, of going to high school with children who established Quick Trip and Mazio's Pizza. Their driveways, those friends' driveways, were full of current year brand new sports cars. For the kids. For the kids. For the kids.
Yeah,
And so it's not fair at our house was very different.
that's right. I might have bought you your first car, but it wasn't the one you wanted. It was the one I gave you. So how do you guys deal with life not being fair? Right, exactly right. You learn to adapt, right? You accept the truth of it, and then you drive on. Most often, though, I think that when they say it's not fair, they really mean that they're not gaining an advantage or a benefit. And so it's about them.
Troy said this before he looked out real quick, but he was saying a lot of this comes from comparison.
Mm-hmm.
And comparison is, I was told, comparison is the thief of joy.
Did you hear that? You can make a little embroidery thing out about that. Comparison is the thief of joy. So don't compare yourself to other people. And you'll be a lot happier. I think that's true. So how about that? Everything we spend our last 10 or 15 minutes saying? So, how about this one? I didn't mind talking to my children right up until they made it apparent that I needed to talk at them. And then I did that. It usually involved 4 fingers fully extended and joined in a knife hand gesture. and then they, at that point, we were done. As sovereign and king of my own home, when we lay down judgment, it sticks. Or that bag that I keep packed for you by the door is always available. I check it every day. I make sure it's restocked for you. Everything in there is clean and ready to go. I'm always ready for you to go.
I used to talk with our children when they would do something maybe they were supposed to. And one time, our daughter said, "Mom, why don't you just punish me? They'd rather me not talk to them."
That's right. Talking to them sometimes is a way of just breaking them down. My mom broke my soul one night till 2 in the morning talking at me. I was asleep standing up. I don't even know where we went. But when she was done and I finally woke up and I was alone in the kitchen, I was like, guess I better get ready for school. Yeah, it's painful. You can make talking such a punishment if you're careful with it. So mothers have that power a lot more than men. Have you ever seen a mother just line her ducks up in a row with a look? So,
I don't know, my dad, I'm pretty scary.
I believe you. Mostly I see it exhibited, though, by women because they don't want to, they just give you the look.
One of the things that you don't have up here is, as parents, we need to do a good job of listening. A lot of times, and I'm as much as fault as anybody, we have a preconceived idea of what our child is going to say.
Yeah.
And we don't really sit there and listen to what they actually are saying and look for the underlying issues also.
Go ahead, Amy.
I was gonna say, right now I'm learning this balance because, being a single parent household, the boys and I are close, and as Josh gets older, he and I can sit down and have a conversation, but it's sometimes borderline friendship, and sometimes I have to put on that parent hat when
Yeah.
he crosses the line and say, I like that we can discuss things, but right now I'm talking at you,
Yeah.
instead of.
My brother used to say, I'm done entertaining your speak. So,
But it's hard. I like that we're close and we can discuss
Yeah.
things, but I'm trying to find that balance between there's times where I have to draw a line in the sand and say, this time, we're not
Yeah.
discussing.
so some things were up for negotiation and some were not. I would negotiate a bedtime as you got older. I would negotiate, the hours you were able to be out, access to the car. But some things weren't negotiable. And every family has different non-negotiables. I didn't have a lot, but I did have one, and it was the rule that it was beaten into me as a child, and that was that you never bring the police or social services into the home. That was our only rule in our house. And that was because we would have failed the inspection by both of them too. And so you could do anything you want, but you could never do those two and stay a part of the family. My mother made us that promise.
And one solution does not fit all.
Yeah. Oh no, well that one did for all of us. If we wanted to have a family, we needed to do those two things.
I'm thinking when my parents got a little upset with me, I told the line right now.
Yeah.
My brother just bowed his back and said, make me.
There you go. Yeah, and so different discussions for different people. So, however, here is what I would offer to you when it comes to that. Decide as a team what your hard and soft rules are, and then be consistent. Because the worst way to discover a spouse's parenting red line is when you and the child stumble over it against them together. You're the team.
I was gonna say, in your pick your battle, you gotta pick your battles because as a parent, you need to win,
Okay?
especially when they're younger. So you need to make sure you pick the battle you're gonna win, because they need to understand it's the authority figure in a parent, so you gotta win.
Some things you don't
So if
argue
you're
about
not
that.
gonna win, don't go into that battle.
Right. If you're not willing to win, So identify the hills you'll die on, and the rest you won't. Yes, ma'am.
Of course, because I'm from a different culture than you are. In my family, and there was father and the mother. So if one of these have no nerve to deal with child, then the other has to
get to that place and take stuff in peaceful way.
Yeah.
Because I was person with temper in our family and fight with my son, and then my husband say, okay, you in this room, you in that room, and I will come to talk with both of you.
Negotiator. He took on the Henry Kissinger role. So, but you bring up a great point that's not in the slides, which is that there are two of you.
Yes.
Use each other effectively. There were some discussions that my wife reserved for me without my knowledge until they came up, and all of a sudden, go talk to your father. You can imagine what those conversations were. And there were some that I was like, no, you go talk to your mother about that.
And there's just one stuff, because I was all the time talkative person, and my husband was not. So, child take his words much more serious than mine.
Yeah.
We have good relation today, we do. But he, sometimes when he comes with some idea, that's idiot idea, then my husband will say, now you go away from that. And then said, Carol, let's go to eat ice cream. And then get home, and Carol come to me and said, I was stupid, wasn't I? And I said, what you done to him? He said, man's job.
Right?
It's very important that both parents are involved in raising the child. And then it is no losing, like you say, don't. In my house, my battle always is win. My child cannot win when I am there. There's no way. I'm smarter, I have more experience, this child cannot fool me. And that's that.
There you go.
And I'm not his friend, I'm parent.
You know, Rick, when it comes to picking your battles, too, I think one of the hardest things with that is, and is most important, is you have to know I have to know Leslie, and she has to know me. Because there's going to be times when we're going to have to fight battles and they're not there.
Yeah.
That there's going to be certain
So
things
you,
that she
yeah.
is like a red line on.
You've got weapons that I didn't have. I couldn't text Denise and say, I just did this. Boom. And so that before they could even get a hold of her, we had concurrence. Because our biggest, well, not biggest, but an obstacle we always had to fight was being mom and popped, which is what you're describing. I didn't get the answer I want from dad, so I'm going to go see mom. There's no way that should ever happen. I mean, especially for you, you're great. You get both answers, right? You're like, I want to see the manager. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm the manager.
I mean, there's a reason it's designed for two.
Yeah. Yeah, because the caseload requires a second set of eyes. So, to get to your listening point, I always like to think I provided my children an opportunity to speak, and I think that they concur with that. But I never overly empathized or sympathized with their position. I wouldn't emotionally adopt, what they were saying at face value.
I think it helps though if they, are you saying right here, try to see it from the kid's perspective? Is that
Yeah.
what you're- Okay. So the other day I got a note from home through Matthew's teacher about something, and when I confronted Matthew about it, the first thing I said was, your teacher told me this happened, I want to hear it from your side. So
Yeah.
let him explain it. He still had to serve a consequence, but at least he felt heard.
Yes. Sometimes that's enough. I can accept punishment now that I've been heard. That's what our whole legal system is based on, right? I get my day in court, and then if you impose justice, I receive it. So it's not a bad thing, provided it's not life, limb, or eyesight level immediacy, right? Nobody gets to speak when you're saving lives. You just kick people out of the way of danger and deal with the consequences. That's a tough lesson to teach kids. They hate it. They fight it because nobody wants to believe it.
Not my job.
That's a good answer. Happiness comes from within. Go to your room and find it. So, there's a lot of ways you can say it. So, but it's true. Go ahead.
Our society tends to want to say, you get life, liberty, and happiness. It's your right to be happy. But happiness comes from doing what's right and
Right. That's a mature perspective and understanding of happiness. It has to be taught. It has to be demonstrated. And then you have to give them time to self-prove it. But
Most of the time it's serving others, not yourself.
yeah. Or teaching them how to be satisfied from those actions.
You know, Gene always says it's up to you. It is, we choose our attitude. We can choose to be angry, unforgiving.
It was a tough lesson for my daughter to learn because she would spend all of her time just like a rocket ricocheting off of other people, and I'm like, stop, calm down. Would you land for a minute so we can talk? And it wasn't until her, 20s that she really figured it out and stopped giving people, all the keys to her emotions.
So we have to define happy, and then define, while you're raising your children, let them understand that you are not necessarily grading on a curve because of your 100% happiness. I think that
Yeah.
there's secular happiness and then there's godly happiness and joy, and so
Yep.
I look at that. No one is happy 100% of the time as a absolute. And not just us trying to have a child understand that you're not going to be happy all the time. Because the situation, like we were talking about going from one parent to the other, I didn't have that either. You had one, even though I had two women in the house, there was one I went to because the other was passive.
Yep.
And so defining happiness is how you show them happiness by living.
I never tried to teach my children the whole happiness part. I tried to teach them righteousness as the Bible explains it. I didn't discuss happiness. I didn't care about your happiness. Well, my life is control violence. Don't speak to me of your joy. Let's talk about the person that you're supposed to be, and let's mold and shape that. And it was always whenever they resisted that the hardest, that they got shaved the most.
Part of that is, to your point, it has to be taught. But I remember getting some phone calls and as the kids were getting older, so-and-so did this, did that, or whatever. And I said, wait a minute, stop. And we had this conversation this morning. Look around. You are truly blessed. A lot more than a lot of other people may be blessed. There's always somebody that is in a worse condition or situation than you are. So really think about the blessing that you have.
That's hard for young people to believe. Yeah. So just so everybody, we're talking about tweens now. So who's 20 in this room? Who's in your 20s? Come on, front yourselves. Let's go. Are you still really? I would have thought much younger. So we're mostly consolidated. There we go. There's another over there, and there's some more over there. 20s are tough, right? The world tells you you're an adult, but it still doesn't yet treat you like one fully. I mean, you've got a job, a family, kids. Some of you have school. But it's a thing, right? And this is when life starts really smacking you around, right? Because the bumpers we talked about earlier are, for the most part, gone. And it's you having a new relationship with your parents and adult figures.
Something that hasn't been mentioned yet is there's a difference between happiness and joy. And what are we teaching our kids? Are we teaching them happiness? Well, happiness depends on things.
Proverbs says happiness is fleeting,
Yeah.
but joy lasts. But joy in the Lord, and I'm paraphrasing poorly, lasts forever. And so, yeah, you're right. And the Bible sees a difference between the two, and what brings them around, and what does it. I think I got to skip through this slide. Was there? Go ahead.
The other thing is, and they're not up on the board, but as we're saying, is that the difference for me between my 20s and my 40s would be that it wasn't until I hit my late 30s that I didn't care about what the world thought about me, because I was having to change my worldview to a Christian worldview. So the world was not my barometer.
I agree. I'll steal part of that, but only to make a sidebar a joke. So I haven't been a 20 in over 40. And so I really don't remember what my 20s are like. Let's admit it. I have specific memories of instances, but I don't really remember my entire 20s anymore. It's more than twice that amount of time in my past. Hopefully, I filled up all that space with new lessons. So it's always valid to say that times have changed, and it's a little bit different now than it was when I was 20. But it's not fair to use that as a reason to discount information that you're being provided. So for parents of kids in their 20s, that's a tough role, right? Have you guys done that with your parents? Have they figured it out yet, that they're just an advisor and a mentor now? They don't have, full constitutional authority?
So define tween. So I always viewed tween as preteen.
Were you here when we started? What is a tween? Come on, I said it for everybody.
So that you're viewing tween as in their 20s?
Yeah, we're using Hobbit terminologies. You were not here. You were here. You were with me in this room. You're not an adult till you're 33.
Wrong.
You think so?
Yeah, totally. My children are all adults and they're in their 20s.
Because you've transitioned. I'm pointing at my screen, but
I agree with that. I agree with Tracy on that, right? And
that's good. It took us long enough to get here.
I think it's how you, but I think it's how you raise your children too. Like I tell my kids all the time that by the time that, when they hit 20 and they leave the house, they're on their own. Now, whether or not they understand that fully, right? And the transition is going to come. It's going to be
Right.
difficult. I mean, there's a
Because on your own comes with air quotes, because there's still some safety and security provided.
right? I mean, they're still your kids and everything else of that issue. But I distinctly remember the period of time that my mother gave me advice that wasn't wanted or sought. And I had to tell her, I said, hey, Mom, just because you give me advice doesn't mean I'm going to take it. And that was like a kind of a wake-up point that I think to myself, that's what you raise your children to do, right?
You're like 4 slides ahead of me. Yeah.
It's like to take the reins and run with it. Like, I look forward to that day because it seems to me,
Yeah, go ahead.
from looking forward, I'm not there yet, but it seems to me that it's like, oh, what a burden. Now I don't have to make their decisions too.
Yes.
Right. Amen.
If you, yeah, I love being an empty nester. If you raise them to be that, but it's got to be conscious. We always raised our children with the knowledge and understanding that one day they must go. Not should, not could. You must. I have other things to do.
See, when I left for college, my parents transitioned to, they would not give me advice unless I asked for it.
Yeah.
And that's the same.
Did they have a formal ceremony where we did that?
Yeah, so what it did was it made me want to go ask them because they wouldn't give it to me unless I asked once I left.
So I think it depends on the kid too. Like my oldest brother went to the Navy, was gone, and like out. Then my middle brother, he was always the loner, like never called home, never did anything. And I was the baby, right? So mom was like, oh goodness, it's the last one. I got to, continue to spread and ooze my wisdom, But at the same time, it's like they raised us to be leaders and to go.
Well, and the disclaimer they gave me was, you're an adult now, if you mess up, you pay adult consequences.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I think what helps in the transitioning is that you don't have to give them, you just need to show them. So my son and my daughter, youngest, have had I don't know if they like it so much, but they've sat next to me or sit next to me in city meetings where it got a little heated towards our family, and they sat there and watched me go through it, and that was better than telling them how to do it. They were close enough, thank goodness, to be able to see that I'm transitioning by still showing an example of how we put our foot down.
Right.
And that is better than telling them anything. If you show them and they're that close proximity, that's good stuff.
So we're a couple of slides ahead. So go ahead, and then I'll burn through these so that we can get there.
Well, I want to go back and interrupt
Yeah, it doesn't matter how much technology you have. If you're righteous in the eyes of God, you're the same person you would be with or without it.
Well, in other words, this applies back to the tweens. Scripturally, there are people in their mid-40s, middle ages, and 60s are still in their tweens.
You can be an emotional child all your life.
Right.
I know some. I don't let them in my life. So, we talked about this much earlier. It seems so late to you, huh? The average age right now at which young people leave the home is somewhere between 24 and 26. Does that shock you?
I think that's part of what's wrong with society.
I would tell you that throughout most of the history and in the Bible, they never left home. They became adults inside the family village.
And we don't do that, and there's an unfortunate, I think, that we don't live generation to generation, but, so we can't function with that.
Right.
Well, you know, some never left. My parents died in home where I was there. I left home, and my son is there when my parents really would not exist anymore. So it is, if you are 45 and you are living with your parents, it's quite normal. It's not a big deal. I mean, we live all in families, and that is nothing is perfect. That's have good stuff and the bad stuff. Good stuff is that the generation are connecting. You are learning from the experience of these people. Bad stuff is that you cannot do whatever you want.
Yeah. The difference is the way we perceive it in our culture. In your culture, you are an adult, you're a man and a woman, you're a part of the tribe, and you have duties, roles, responsibilities, and functions, and you have a say, as much as the patriarch's willing to allow. In our culture, though, we've never had that, and so we don't know what to do with that, and we don't train people to function well in that, and so the only way for us to get them to be an adult is to launch them, and that's why we say, you got to launch. Did I steal your thunder? Okay. So that number is expected to increase. Yeah. The reasoning behind that is that the amount of time it takes to get someone ready to fully operate in a digital capitalist economy takes a little bit longer. I don't know if it's true. You're going to find out. I'll be gone, and I leave that task to you. Right?
So all three of us had different styles of leaving the home, but we were all raised the same.
Don't you think some of that is economics? I think sometimes they can't afford to go out on their own with prices of houses and things like that today.
So that doesn't just include cohabitating. The survey had about 15 different areas in which they were financially dependent still, they were educationally dependent, they were economically dependent, all those substrata and categories, and that's the age they come up with. Now, there's a lot of averaging in this. There's a lot of people who have been gone from their parents' house for 20 years that have come back in the last 4 because things, right? It's been a wild ride the last 4 years. And you probably got 2 more left. Just you heard it here first. And so all of these different ages of people who have lost things and had to come back home to regroup are in that number. I don't want to skew it so that you think we're back down to where we were, but
I was just going to say, as parents, you can set your children up for failure or success economically. So our children had to start our kids had to start working at a very young age, and they had their own money, so they knew that 18 was coming and the precedent we set for them. And so, are you going to have money to go out on your own kind of thing?
And it's expectation management too. It's taken.
takes money to go on a date. That's right.
So you might have to live in a shack with an old used mattress and one chair, eat ramen noodle and tuna fish every night, but you're doing it on
You say that, but has anyone else ever done that? All right. Fun.
My youngest brother, so my siblings and I had the same trend that Austin did. My youngest brother, he graduated college and he came back home fully intending to live there. And my parents handed him a lease and said, no, you're not. Get out. You know? You've graduated, you have a job, get out.
But you don't have that discussion with them at 26. You have it with them at 13.
Yeah.
You tell them in 13 years.
Yeah, you've got 5 years.
So this one, who was it in here that thanked their parents for their advice but says no? Who said that comment? So, yeah. Thank you for your advice, but I've made my decision. That's the most adult compliment that your child can pay you. You know, it's a way of not saying thank you for all the years of wonderful advice and foundation laying. I can stand on my own and not be rude about it, but I don't believe that I'm going to do what you just recommended. I've got my own catastrophe to do.
Just to say something, it's different again.
Did you just say just to say something?
It's also culture. We are paying our children's school. Until child is going to the school, we are paying everything. So this connection with family is much stronger about that too. If you are paying something, you want to know what have you done. Did you finish something or not? So it's different.
Yeah.
I will not say it's better or this. We are not preparing our children to leave the house when they are 18. If you do this, people will say, what's wrong with you? So
Right, because leaving the house has a different connotation for you guys.
yes.
That's being socially evicted for moral turpitude usually. Why did I send them away? Because they're not good people and I couldn't trust them in the village. Whereas we're like, we have land for days. We're like, you go find your land. That's what drives American culture.
I would insert into this that from Genesis 3 on, the devil specifically has been trying and doing a pretty good job of dividing family to destroy the construct that God did and expects still to create. And it goes home quick to me during this discussion because you can and you still should, no matter how bad your upbringing seems, as long as you raise them in the church with faith, that will be the thing that brings them, I wouldn't say back necessarily, but it will make them, it helped us create a family in God's, I'm just saying, because don't forget the devil, and especially in this country and others, is specifically trying to destroy the family.
That's our entire next week's class.
Okay, well, I'm glad I
So it's a great way to introduce it.
That's what I've been thinking. The only thing we really haven't mentioned so far is, do we as Christian parents deal differently with our children than the rest of society that aren't Christian parents?
I wish I wish we didn't, but we do. Our standards of behavior are different, right? I say this a lot. Your standard for your humanity should not be good or bad or just or right. The Bible's word is righteous in the eyes of the Lord. And that is the man who does the things the Lord instructs him to do. That's it, period. That's God's definition of whether or not you're his son or daughter. That's why it's the biggest compliment you can get paid in the Bible. The roll call of faith lists people by their righteousness. And that's what it says, exactly. Abraham was righteous in the eyes of the Lord. Noah was righteous in the eyes of the Lord. Do what God tells you to do, and you'll be right. In God's eyes. Something profound was just said. You're right, that's our moral blue book. If you're not familiar with the terminology, the blue book is the original pamphlet written for the United States Army that told us how to be an army. It's the blue book. So
By the way, Ray, we'll continue some of this discussion in part in the sermon.
wonderful. Okay, so just 2 more slides. Go ahead.
Scripturally, it says bring them up in the way and they will not. To me, that means when a woman first conceives, start reading the Bible, read it out loud. From that moment on, and you bring them up in the way, they will not depart from it. So,
Right, except for the prodigal son. So somebody has. You're not wrong. We impress our values and our morals and God on our children as early as we can. And then we allow them to make adult decisions. Whatever that may be, even if it breaks your heart, adults got to be free to adult, period. And then know your place. Just because you disagree with it doesn't make it bad. It makes you disagree with it. There are a lot of ways to solve a problem. Your way doesn't have to be the only way. And they have to be allowed to live their lives. If you've built them right, though, then I think they fly pretty much the way we would expect them to fly. And they should make decisions in line with your values, morals, and ethics. Or not. And then we just pray for, by, with, about, and to them. All right. Any other closing comments then? Okay. So it's 10:17. You've got 13 minutes before we start service. It'd be a great time to read Titus because Fred said you're supposed to read Titus before the lesson because you'll get a lot more out of it. It is a 3-minute read. Okay? All right, and thank you for your time. Next week, we'll talk about demons.